Modern technology is made possible because of semiconductors. They had a monumental impact on our society as they are an essential component of electrodomestics, which have enabled advances in communications, healthcare, transportation, clean energy, and more. A world without semiconductors would be a life without electronic devices. There would be no smartphones, radios, TVs, computers, video games, or advanced medical diagnostic equipment. Semiconductors are sometimes referred to as integrated circuits, ICs, or microchips, are made from pure elements, typically silicon or germanium, or compounds such as gallium arsenide. In a process called doping, small amounts of impurities are added to these pure elements, causing large changes in the conductivity of the material. Semiconductors touch almost every sphere of economic activity and have had an enormous impact on the world's economy over the past 50 years. The semiconductor industry has helped create $7 trillion in global economic activity. The industry boasts an annual revenue of over $300 billion, and at $155,000 of GDP per full-time employee, the labor productivity of the worldwide semiconductor industry stands 37% higher than that of the US economy as a whole. According to Yahoo Finance, the three biggest contenders in the world in 2020 were the Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, who brought in a revenue of $45.4 billion, Samsung at $52.2 billion, and Intel at $73.9 billion in total revenue. But something happened. The first hints of trouble emerged in the spring of 2020. People stayed at home and stopped shopping. Factories closed and companies had to backorder. But then demand roared back faster than anyone expected, especially for devices that assisted people to work and attend classes from home using their computers. According to a market search, global PC shipments totaled 302.6 million units in 2020, a 13.1% jump over the prior year. This has been the highest annual growth rate since 2010, when the PC market rose by 13.7% due to consumer demand in the wake of the financial crisis. Nowadays, most home appliances, from TVs to air purifiers, all come with smart customized chips. The pandemic created a trend that customers have been accumulating more inventory than normal to protect themselves against future uncertainties, a tactic that might be persisting for some time. In a span of months, the most serious shortage in years of the semiconductors was brewed. General Motors Company has been forced to stop production in 3 North American plants, and Ford Motor Company is bracing for a 20% drop in near-term output. The global auto industry will produce 1.5 million to 5 million fewer vehicles this year than originally planned because of the supply constraints. This translates to about $61 billion of sales that would be lost for automakers due to the chip shortage. Car makers rely on semiconductors for a multitude of purposes, from the engine control units to instrument clusters, which is a digital panel including speedometer, fuel gauge, the accelerometers, which measure the acceleration of the car, as well as systems like power steering and brakes. Prices for key smartphone components, including chipsets and displays, have risen as much as 15% since September 2020. Besides the pandemic, the US sanctions against Huawei were a major part on the shortage. The telecommunications equipment began hoarding components to ensure its survival from crippling US sanctions. Led by Huawei, Chinese imports of chips of all kinds climbed to almost $380 billion in 2020, making up almost a fifth of the country's overall imports for the year. Rivals, including Apple, worried about their stock, acted similarly. On top of that, the restrictions imposed on Huawei opened an opportunity for other Android handset makers to try and attract their US customers. That created even more demand for processors, but the supply chain wasn't prepared for it. The pandemic shut down chip production facilities in China and Taiwan, 2 dominant chip-producing nations, which put a big strain on supply. This shortage has made it clearer than ever that countries across the world need more digital sovereignty and less dependency on others for key technologies. Countries are running on technologies built elsewhere, and they want that to change. According to the Semiconductor Industry Association, US semiconductor companies amount for 47% of global chip sales, but only 12% of global manufacturing is done in the United States. Around half of global semiconductor sales are still controlled by US companies, although their technological lead is mostly confined to research and design. Over recent decades, chip makers like Qualcomm and Nvidia outsourced some of their production to Asian giants, including TSMC, alongside the likes of Apple, who design but do not make their own chips. US national chip-making champion Intel is planning to do more Asian outsourcing with TSMC in the future as well. US officials and strategists now view this as a mistake that leaves global chip manufacturing dangerously concentrated in Taiwan and South Korea, and thus vulnerable to Chinese interference. But this might be the only option. New semiconductor factories are among the most complex manufacturing facilities to build, costing billions of dollars and taking years to construct. That means much of the world's electronic industry will continue to depend heavily on existing factories, many of them in Taiwan. Already, TSMC is producing 70% of the global auto industry's supply of a key type of chip called a microcontroller. Still, the Biden administration is set to examine the semiconductor shortage to identify opportunities to improve both short and long-term demand. The expected period of this review of the industry is around 100 days. Based on the expectation that demand should settle to a more normalized level, much of the industry seems to feel the most impactful period of the shortage could subside by mid-2021. The US has had to focus on onshoring greater chip-making capacity. Taiwan Semi is already expanding in Arizona, but it will require more significant resources to prevent further supply issues. We are living in an era of hyper-connectivity that redefines our societies, cultures, and how we communicate. Today, our mobile devices support social media and web browsing, multimedia entertainment, and various forms of connectivity that allow instant access to thousands of applications and internet-based services. In the next few years, mobile devices are to support augmented reality, seamless voice control, 3D holographic screens, and powerful predictive analytics. All of these advantages offer unparalleled possibilities to enrich the lives of people around the world, while generating growth and opportunity across the global economy. This is why shortage has to be dealt with in the fastest way possible. What do you think of the current political stance with semiconductors? Does the risk for Chinese influence over Asian countries that produce the majority of the world's chip manufacturing concern you? Let us know in the comments section below. Subscribe today to Think Big Tech for more content on future innovations and technologies.